All right, and there you have it. This meeting is being recorded. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a coffee and chat about in-person jury trials for our civil district courts. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for being here. My name is Mary Lou Alvarez. I've been your monitoring court judge since the beginning of April, and I will continue to do so until the end of June. And as many of you know, hopefully all of you know, June 1st begins our in-person jury trials for our civil district courts, which is what we're all here to talk about. We have with us Judge Canales, Judge Haas, and Judge Diaz. And I think that's who we have. Judge Jimenez's case settled early in the week, and so she's not with us. And then Judge Diaz's case settled. And just even as we were planning for this conference or presentation, not presentation, informal chat, right after lunch, Judge Canales and Judge Haas were going to be the last standing presiding judges of our in-person jury trials beginning next week. And I will let Judge Canales start and, introduce the good news, and then also introduce what was just prepared not even 2 hours ago. And then we'll be taking some questions. So just so big view, I'm going to post the letter dated May 27th, 2021 from Judge Ronhell in the chat. If you haven't had an opportunity to review it, you'll have it in the chat in just one moment. And we're gonna have Judge Canales and Judge Haas take about 5 to 10 minutes, and Judge Diaz, and then we'll answer some questions. We are all here to answer your questions and hopefully put everyone at ease as we come back to the courthouse in person safely with excitement. But Judge Canales, I will turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see you all. Again, I'm David Canales. I preside over the 73rd Civil District Court. And so first off, I've got to start off by saying my case actually settled about an hour ago, so I will not be actually trying my case next week. But we did go through the process of starting pre-trials anyway this morning, at which point I went through what I anticipated would be the protocols we'd be undergoing in person. And so if y'all have not already had a chance to look at the letter issued by Judge Ronhell, I would strongly encourage you, as strongly as I could, to review those, to review it and read it. It mimics essentially what the Office of Court Administration, which is the arm of the state that gives us guidance on what we do as courts in conjunction with the Texas Supreme Court on how we conduct our proceedings. And they've been the most involved in this process as they've ever been, simply because of the pandemic and the way we've had to shift gears to remote hearings and processes. And so I'd encourage you again to look at his letter. It pretty much dictates what the protocols are going to be. So everyone is aware. There was some confusion maybe a little bit out there with regard to whether the governor's order or the Texas Supreme Court's existing order was going to be what we'd follow. As of right now, we are under, we believe, the emergency order still issued by the Supreme Court, which it issued an amended order earlier this week, extending in large part the orders that were already in place to August 1, where they encouraged the continuation of remote proceedings, however, vesting within the trial courts the ability to move forward with an in-person trial, jury trials, amongst other things. And so that's where what we were basing our in part our abilities going forward. And so to give you all a heads up, the Supreme Court and has essentially vested in OCA the guidelines to assist us. And they're based largely off of a person's vaccination status, which, so you all know, we're not really going to specifically ask anyone if they're vaccinated or not. But we will instruct people according to what the letter says and what the Supreme Court, we believe, is telling us, and that's that if people are vaccinated, they don't have to comply with social distancing or masking requirements, although we would strongly encourage people to wear masks while they're in a courtroom. And for those that are not vaccinated, if they believe that if they don't want to if they don't want to be part of that one group, obviously, then we would encourage them to be socially distant. And so our courtrooms, because of the way things have gone and the way we were anticipating things happening, have been marked off and with spaces and whatnot for everyone to sit, socially distance. And so we have already a baseline for that to happen. So I'm just kind of touching on what I anticipated our case was gonna look like, given what the order said. So I'll elaborate a little bit further, but let me hand it over to Judge Haas if he has anything he wants to add, since I believe his trial is still moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Judge Canales. So it looks like mine is the last case left, at least for next week, as far as in-person jury trials. We're scheduled to have a 6-day trial. It's a family law modification with an attorney on one side and a pro se on the other. We're scheduled to start on Wednesday, pre-trial on Tuesday. I think the biggest change, I think, from pre-COVID trials is Dyer. That's going to be the trickiest because it involves obviously the most people. And what we're trying, at least for now, is to use the presiding court for Dyer for all the in-person jury trials. And if that's not enough space, there's going to be a spillover space in the train station. So our IT people have been setting that up all week to try to make sure we have video and audio, and that we can conduct a voir dire with people, some of them in the presiding courtroom and some in the train station if necessary. And then once voir dire is over, the rest of the trial would be conducted in our own courtrooms, assuming they're big enough. And for those of us who have smaller courtrooms, I should be able to conduct mine in my courtroom, I would anticipate. But for those judges that have smaller courtrooms, they may have to switch off with other judges. In terms of how we handle the jurors, for right now, we're following, of course, CDC guidelines, which say, in essence, that if you're vaccinated, you do not need to wear a mask and you do not need to social distance. If you are not vaccinated, the CDC still recommends that you wear a mask and social distance at least 6 feet. So we are going to have different sections in the presiding courtroom where, without necessarily asking people whether they're vaccinated or not, just giving people the option of sitting in a place that is marked off for social distancing, or sitting in another section which is not. And hopefully we can fit everybody in. Obviously, we don't know how many people are going to choose one or the other. If we can't fit everybody in, then we'd be using the train station. And I know some of the other judges are going to talk about some of the other things. One of the other main recommendations that we're getting is to use juror questionnaires. And this is a way of reducing the amount of time, at least, perhaps, that voir dire takes. And so that's something that I've been talking to my parties about, is trying to prepare a questionnaire and minimizing the amount of time we actually spend orally questioning the panel. That's for voir dire. And I don't know, Judge Alvarez, do you want me to get into the rest of the trial, or were you trying to do this in pieces?
I think if you don't mind going through the rest of the trial, and then we'll.
Okay, that's fine. But I think voir dire is the hardest part. As far as the rest of the trial, we've measured off all our courtrooms, as Judge Canales has said, and those are marked, 6 feet. In mine, I believe I've been told we can fit 18 people, so we should be able to have a jury trial. The seating for the jury, unless people do not want to social distance, but assuming people want to social distance, the seating will be likely in the gallery. as opposed to the jury box. All our normal protocols are in place. We still have the plexiglass. We have the hand sanitizer. We'll be giving out masks to people who don't have them. And all the cleaning hygiene protocols are still in place. In terms of, I think there's somewhat of an open question as to whether we continue to broadcast this on Zoom or on YouTube, or if that's even necessary since the courtroom is open. And in theory, at least, people should be able to watch. So arguably, we don't need to broadcast it to have public access, but I think some judges will be anyway. I know another issue that came up was evidence, how that's going to be presented and handled. I personally don't have a problem handling papers that have been touched by other people. And so I don't think that's going to be an issue for me, but there may be other judges that have other opinions on that. I guess the other tricky now in my case, I know there's going to be some hybrid testimony, and this is another issue that we're going to have to work through. One of my parties is going to have witnesses that are out of state. They have been permitted to; those witnesses have been permitted to appear by Zoom, and so one of the issues we're going to have to work through is how do we allow those witnesses to appear by Zoom, but also make sure that the jurors can see them and all the participants in the trial can see them. And of course, people need to be able to hear each other and that kind of thing. So that's mostly a technological challenge, but that's another issue that we're working through. And again, as far as masking and social distancing, I think it's the same. The recommendations are if you're vaccinated, you don't need to do it. If you're not vaccinated, you should. And that's the guidance we're getting as well. And so people will have those options. And finally, when it comes to deliberations, it's likely if people are social distancing, it's likely that our jury rooms are not big enough. And if that's the case, then what we will likely have to do is use the courtroom itself to allow the jurors to deliberate. And obviously we would have to make sure that the attorneys and participants are obviously not in there, but also not listening in. And so that might require some extra security to make sure people are not listening in. And I think that's pretty much what we're planning. So I'll turn it over to Judge Diaz at this point.
Thank you to my wonderful colleagues. You've covered a lot of the topics. And as Judge Alvarez indicated, my case did settle, but I will go over a few things that were not touched upon that I think would have come up in my trial. So first of all, I do want to start off by just giving a round of applause to my colleagues. I don't know if you all understand how much work goes into the planning and the logistics behind the scenes. It has been a year and a half of marathon meetings. I don't think any of us have had a lunch break in the last year and a half. Our lunches are all comprised of meetings, just trying to figure out how best to serve you all, to serve our litigants, to make sure that the system keeps moving forward. And so we've, kind of come all the way from one end of the spectrum to the other, from learning and figuring out how to go completely remote with our court system to now transitioning back safely to in-person. And we appreciate all of your patience and input. It has been tremendously helpful as we've gone forward, figuring out what is in the best interest of everyone in this process. So thank you very much for your patience and for your continued patience. This is a work in progress. As you all know, from one day to the next, CDC guidelines change, the governor's orders change, the Supreme Court's orders change, the guidance from the Office of Court Administration changes, and we are having to adapt from literally one day to the next. So this is what we have today. That may change next week, and we'll continue to keep you updated, and I'm grateful to Judge Alvarez for this forum to do that. With that, I am one of those judges that has a really small courtroom, and there are a few of us that have those. They were formerly county courts and are now district courts. So I obviously could not conduct a safe, socially distanced voir dire or trial in my courtroom. So one of the things that we've had to figure out for judges like me is the logistics behind that. Judge Haas mentioned that we'll be using presiding. So for those of you that are wondering, we have actually relocated presiding court, the operations of presiding court, to another courtroom, to Judge Torres's courtroom for the time being, to open up presiding for judges like me to utilize. It's a larger courtroom to utilize for voir dire and potentially for trials as well. So if you've been to the courthouse, the presiding court room is adjacent to what we refer to commonly as the train station. It's a big open area that has a lot of meeting rooms and seating for individuals who are conferring. So we have opened that space up as a spillover if needed, if we do not have the appropriate space in presiding court. In particular, I'm talking about voir dire. So I have to give a kudos to our IT folks who have been working around the clock to make sure that we have the technology we need to facilitate that. And the way I normally conduct voir dire is I split it up between general and specific. And if there is spillover into the train station, I believe this is the method that many of us would likely utilize. Essentially, there will be a camera set up in the train station so that everyone in the presiding courtroom can see when a question is asked in general voir dire. Every juror will have their numbers that they can hold up, and they will be holding those numbers up both in the presiding courtroom and in the train station. And we will ask our attorneys to go through and identify for the record which individuals have their cards up in response to your general questions. For specific voir dire, the way I would do it, the way I normally do it is bring folks in one row at a time, one or two rows at a time, and ask them the specific questions while everyone else is either waiting in the hallway or in the train station. So for specific voir dire, I don't believe we would have the issue of communication between presiding and the train station. I think that would all occur within the presiding courtroom. So sounds more complicated, I think, than it really is. We have a great team helping us who will be on standby as well. Our IT team will be on standby to help with any issues that come up. And lastly, just wanted to touch on the issue that Judge Haas mentioned on whether we'll be broadcasting these as some of our hearings have been broadcasted on YouTube. It is kind of up in the air. And I will say one of the factors that we are considering is due to the social distancing and the limited space, if we do not have space for observers to join the courtroom, and we can anticipate that, there may be a need to or a consideration given to that to possibly live stream it so that individuals may observe who may not be able to physically be in the courtroom due to those distancing guidelines. So those are things that we're considering, and we would love your input on any of those topics as well as we move forward. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Judge Diaz. Let me just go ahead before we open it up to questions and just kind of give everyone a big picture. For many of you, you've been appearing and monitoring court, and you've been hearing the announcements as we kind of have been coming up to this date. For those of you who have not, let me kind of just give a preview and also kind of elaborate on some of the announcements that have been made thus far, because things are changing, things are developing. And I can't highlight enough, again, because I know many of us, when we hear in-person jury trials, our minds go back to February of 2020. That's not where we are. These cases are not going to be tried on Monday and Tuesday predominantly. They are staggered. And if you haven't had an opportunity to review the April 1st order from Judge Ronhell, review it in conjunction with everything else that has happened in the last, 2 days. The 38th Supreme Court order, the OCA guidance that was updated in May of 2021, like, yes, 2 days ago, and Judge Ron Hell's letter from yesterday. Review all 4 documents as you prepare for your in-person jury trials. These cases will be staggered. So if, for example, you are set in the monitoring docket for a June 7th trial, your trial very likely will not be the one that starts June 7th, because there's only one that's going to start on June 7th. And when it starts, that's the voir dire, which means that you will either have a very, very short pretrial, or you will have a pretrial that needs to be coordinated with your trial judge ahead of your voir dire, or there has to be some agreement or some boundaries or some expectations set by all counsel of record as to what the parameters are or what rulings are really needed in order to move forward with voir dire, and maybe finish voir dire at 2 o'clock and then do your pretrial from 3 to 5 and get ready for your first witness the next day. I mean, there's all kinds of varieties of ways that your trial is going to happen. That is part of, just like it was in the olden days. But it is going to be not just a logistic coordination, but also a preparation and a pacing coordination that you're going to have to do with your specific trial judge. And for those reasons, we are really trying to get our assignments out earlier in the week. Again, way back in the good old days of February 2020, you would get your trial assignment Thursday, maybe Friday, the week preceding your Monday, right? Because we had 500 or 600 people in central jury sitting shoulder to shoulder that could go, and we could start 3 or 4 jury trials on Mondays and Tuesdays. Okay, we're not there. We are trying to get your assignments, which means that we need to hear from your announcements back earlier so we can get you and your trial judge paired up earlier in the week preceding your trial setting. But that doesn't mean that you're going to go to trial on Monday. Only one lucky case will be starting voir dire on Monday of the trial week. Everybody else will be paced out. So please be mindful of that. That's something that we've been announcing for a few weeks now. But I really think that that needs to be said over and over again because it's such a paradigm shift from what we're used to. So we will try to get you your trial announcements, or excuse me, trial assignments sooner in the week preceding your trial date. That requires assistance from you all that we have your trial announcements back earlier. So again, please, when those, hopefully those automated messages are going out. I know June 7th, we've kind of had a hiccup that's been resolved just today. But as soon as you get those emails requesting whether or not you're ready, your time announcement, whether an interpreter is needed, the mediation requirement has been complied with, etc., reply all, get that back to our monitoring court office so we can start working the docket and making those assignments so you and your trial judge can be paired up earlier and y'all can start the pacing and the preparation coordination along with, the logistics coordination. I know, and I'll turn it back over to Judge Canales. I know that some of the attorneys had requested doing pretrial back here in the courthouse so you can get a feel for what it is now. It is different. It is so different. You've got plexiglass everywhere. You've got signage everywhere. You've got hand sanitizer bottles everywhere. It's going to be a transition. And again, all of the transition that we do and that we work through together, it's just going to improve it for the next case that comes behind us. And these improvements, thankfully, with such a great bar and such a great bench, if I may say so myself, my colleagues, not necessarily myself, but my colleagues, we are going to be making improvements exponentially. And so for that, I thank you in advance. Judge Canales.
Thank you. So a few things, and this is because the emergency order was extended until August 1, there are still many of those provisions that dictate how these trials are going to go forward in the following way. They're likely going to be a method of maybe a hybrid method, if you will, and that is the order still authorizes trial courts to consider a party's concerns with COVID in appearing in person, and encourages trial courts to allow people to testify remotely, or including parties, attorneys, witnesses, and others that might be connected with a trial. So I know we've said it, and it seems like we're beating a dead horse, but please read those orders, because in my case, there were going to be at least 2 witnesses that for whatever reason were not going to be coming to the courthouse live, or didn't want to come to the courthouse and testify live, but would have testified live as opposed to a video deposition being played during trial through Zoom. And so we discussed that and told them that was acceptable to me. And so bear that in mind. So that's going to be at least in place until August 1, and hopefully sometime around the end of July, we'll get an updated order that tells us what more we can do. Like all of my colleagues have said, and this is something we all probably already know, it's, I would say maybe common sense. There are some people that are already vaccinated that may still feel like they want a social distance. And so, there's certainly that ability for them to do that as well. As Judge Haas said earlier, we are going to have materials here at the courthouse for those that still want masks or want to use one, and everything else. So I wanted to make sure that was clear as far as, one, the fact that some of the trials might still be a little bit hybrid in nature. And then about the social distancing, even for those that may be vaccinated but don't want to sit close to anyone. The other thing is the emergency order also does encourage us to still allow even the participation of jurors in some way. There's a couple of, when you read it, it seems like there might be a conflict, but the guidance we've gotten is that if possible, one, as Judge Haas indicated, the use of jury questionnaires is something we certainly might are exploring, or would certainly be open to. And then 2, at least doing the qualification process, and for some, if you want to do the voir dire process remotely. I can tell you that's I've done 2 virtual trials, and it can be a difficult process, but that's something that if the lawyers want to do, maybe the qualification process, not the qualification, the voir dire process remote, and then have the jurors show up to the courtroom for the trial itself to be live, it can happen that way too. So we're open to those things. As far as, I think Judge Diaz had talked about the how the voir dire would go, right, as far as specific in general. I will tell you that for my trial on that was going to start on Tuesday, I did tell the lawyers, and this is probably the first time I've done it, is that I said I might have to put some restrictions on how much you're able to do in terms of voir dire, time-wise or whatever, because we would have needed to have gotten the panel in that day. Actually, what we had done was the panel was going to report on Wednesday, the way things worked out, and then Judge Haas would have started immediately after that. All that to say, with a 14-day trial, we were looking at impaneling our 12 jurors and 1, if not maybe 2 alternates, given that we're in the summer and whatnot. We wanted to make sure we had that. So it was going to be a little bit pressed, but we were going to, that was something we were looking at. So, and the big thing being my point was we would have needed to make sure to get through voir dire, start to finish, Tuesday or Wednesday in that one day. And so sometimes, especially with, again, these longer trials that have got a lot of experts, a lot of witnesses, voir dire, even in and of itself, asking how many of you know the following people that might testify, and going through a list of 15 or 20 people because they're experts and some are local and might be somebody's treating physician, because it was my case was a personal injury case, then, that would be something I certainly would not want to limit, right? I don't want to say you've got 30 minutes for voir dire, and then they say, well, we've got 25 names we need to cross off here because we want to make sure we don't have somebody on the jury that is Dr. So-and-so's, cousin or et cetera. So those are just some of the things that we were looking at doing in our trial. Judge Diaz or Judge Haas, anything to add before I guess we'll turn it back over to Judge Alvarez?
I was just going to add briefly that it to that point, because we are having to stagger voir dire, it would be really helpful for us to know in advance if you believe that your case is one of those cases that will require a lengthier voir dire. The sooner, the better for the monitoring court judge. I don't want to speak for you, but I would assume for scheduling purposes, if your voir dire is you expect it to need 2 days for some reason. There are cases that necessitate that, but I don't know what the process is, Judge Alvarez, for folks to kind of notify you in the scheduling of that, but just so that you all are thinking about those issues, those are things that we need to consider as well.
So let me just, again, point everyone to the April 1st order from Judge Ronhell. There are going to be the exceptions. And so please appreciate that we understand that. But if we are going to collectively move our jury trials, in-person jury trials, as maximize that movement, then we need to stick to the schedule that has been permitted. One panel a day for our civil district courts in person, which means the voir dire, is expected to be 1 day. Of course, we're coming up to the summer session beginning June 21st. No jury trials should be more than 4 days. So I think we've got a little bit of breathing room to kind of get through that, but definitely let us know, let your trial judge know if sticking with those parameters is going to be impossible. With the caveat that it's not that it's going to be not your desire, right? I think all of us have kind of managed through for the last 15, 16 months of things that aren't necessarily our desire. But if it's just not possible for whatever reason, then we can start planning ahead. This week, next week, June 1st, we started getting opening and space and breathing room relatively quickly. And maybe that's just a function of people knowing that they're going to trial. And so cases are settling where cases should have settled maybe a year ago or 6 months ago, right? And that's part of it. I get it. We all get it. So we had some flexibility, but for those cases settling, the expectation was that 4 jury trials were going to be done next week. And each jury trial, each voir dire was going to take 1 day. And our voir dires, because of the spacing, would have been done in the same room or 2 rooms. And so everything was going to be like blocks. And so if one block exceeded the space, we were going to have to be navigating issues that we would have rather not navigated. So yes, tell your trial judge, again, that comes with us really working together collaboratively to start marrying the case up with the trial judge as quickly as we can the week preceding your jury trial. And I do want to just mention quickly, because it's come up, if for reasons unknown to me at this moment right now, if there is agreement for a virtual jury trial, our judges collectively, we want to give as much flexibility and access to justice to all of you as we can. And we are committing to try to accommodate all of the requests that come in to get these cases tried. I can say though, that at least from what I've been hearing over the last month and a half, the primary desire is for in-person jury trials, and that's where the majority of our judicial resources are allocated. So we will do our best to accommodate your request, but if you are, the 1 in 10 or the 1 in 20 or whatever the stats are, where you and opposing counsel or all counsel are in agreement that your jury trial should be virtual, let us know that sooner rather than later, because that's kind of a little bit of a different expectation as we move forward to the in-person jury trials. Judge Haas, did you have something that you wanted to add about your case and your trial preparation?
So we haven't had the pretrial yet. We're scheduled to do that Tuesday. I've suggested to the parties that they prepare juror questionnaires and hopefully confer on those and discuss them Tuesday. I've suggested 30 minutes for follow-up questioning. I don't know how they're gonna, respond to that. and then challenges. So that's kind of what I'm suggesting. And we'll see how they react to that. I think that's it on that topic.
Well, we're about halfway through, a little bit more than halfway through of our coffee and chat. And we've been doing a lot of chatting, but we haven't opened the floor yet. So the floor is opened. If you have questions, please unmute and let us know and help us develop the conversation. Who would like to go first?
I have a question, Judge.
Yes, sir, Mr. Fagan.
Okay, so it wasn't any of the courts here, and we thank you for having the seminar. Nice to see everybody. I'm set on the 14th of June, which I'm extremely excited about. However, before the recent order, we were set for the virtual, which I had filed an objection to, and I was overruled. So does that mean I don't have to file another motion to ask for in-person, that now with the new rules, my 14th of June setting will be considered in person and we're good to go?
That is my understanding. I have your particular case in front of me, and as memorable as you are, I can't call case numbers the way I would like to, if only I had that ability. But yes, moving forward in June, unless we hear otherwise that there's agreement for Zoom, the jury trial settings beginning June 1st, 2021 are for in-person jury trials.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. All right, other questions?
Judge, Buddy Sox here. How will presiding court proceed? Will you have, is it still going to be via Zoom and hearings will be assigned out for Zoom presiding? Or is that going to go back to some sort of hybrid revised method?
And Mr. Sox, nice to hear from you. I just saw your direct message. I almost missed it, but I looked over and I'm going to say that that exceeds the scope of today's coffee and chat. And we'll get back to you. But can I take us back to in-person jury trials? Let me just reiterate an announcement that's been made in monitoring court over the last couple of weeks. Outside of the 4 days or less jury trial settings for the summer, limited availability on June 21st, the first 3 Mondays of July, we have no more 2021 jury trial settings. The next available jury trial setting is for January 3rd, 2022. If you have a case that is set for a jury trial in 2021 and your case has settled, in particular, if you have a case that is specially set in 2021 and your case has settled, please let us know. Please get that information to Ms. Dossman and to her office so we can start opening up some availability. If there's availability to open up, there may not be. But as things are moving, and as we all know, cases are going to be going to a jury trial. We have summoned our jurors. Our jurors are responding. We have the logistics and the mechanism by which we are moving forward with our in-person jury trials. If your case has settled, please let us know so we can start opening up availability if there is availability to be opened. I think everybody would appreciate that. It gives me no pleasure. I suspect it will give no monitoring judge any pleasure to tell you that the next available jury trial setting isn't for 8 or 9 or 10 months out. So if we work together and kind of make sure that we are doing what we can to open up the dockets if they are to be opened, that would be a great assistance as we move forward to in-person jury trials. Any other questions or any other requests for clarification?
May I chime in for a moment? I'm sorry, Judge Alvarez. I had a lawyer in my courtroom this week that asked a similar question to Mr. Sox and said, how is it going to work when we all show up to presiding on Monday? So I do want to clarify that the June 1st change does not mean that everything comes back to in-person. So please do not come to the courthouse for presiding or monitoring. That is still all online for now. So I just wanted to clarify in the event anyone else was thinking the same thing that other lovely attorney mentioned to me.
And-
Thank you for that.
Well, and we can, so, and under the most recent Supreme Court order for non-jury matters, they recommend continued remote through August 1st. So I think it's safe to say presiding will be remote at least through August 1st. I think that's safe to say.
And as we are speaking, Judge Ronhell has updated his minimum standard health protocol for Bexar County court proceedings order. Thank you, Judge Canales, for letting us know that. I am opening it up and downloading it, and we'll be putting it in the chat in just a few moments. As I do that, are there any other questions? Anybody want to open up?
Judge, I have a question with regards to the priority of assignment of the cases. I have a case that's set on June 7th, but it's one of those, like Judge Canales was describing, where we have 11 experts plus a number of fact witnesses. With regards to how those cases are being assigned out, is there a priority to cases that have longer announcements? I think our announcement is 2 weeks over the shorter cases, or vice versa?
There's not a priority as far as time announcement in stone. I think the only priority in stone, of course, is our CPS jury trials are the priority, right? They're the front of the line because of what's involved and the nature of that litigation. And then the way you get in line, if you will, is you respond, everybody responds to the request for the announcents, right? And so what we've had, at least in the last few weeks, is folks are just not responding to the request for information. And so it's really been hard to kind of gauge where our docket line is, if you will. You know, up to 150 cases, and all of, at least for 2021, the dates that are closed are well into the 160s, 168 cases for that trial Monday. But of those cases, we were asking for information and we're asking for announcements, and that's how you get to the page, if you will. I think the time announcement is important, and we're trying to coordinate, but I can't tell you that that's necessarily a priority. I can tell you that just so everybody can have a sense of how things are moving, at least over the last month. You know, June 1st was our carryover week for all of the jury trials that didn't get reached in May. So after May 3rd, that first trial week, we had 7 cases, I believe. Maybe it was 5 and maybe it was after the second week. But at some point we had 7 cases that were going to be on the carryover week. And, you know, I was wringing my hands. We only have 4 days. How are we going to try 7 cases? And then it went down to 5. And then it went down to 3. And now the day before the trial week is supposed to get started, we're down to 1. And as those cases started getting resolved, you know, we were bumping the cases up to our trial judges because we had all 4 of our trial judges ready to go. I suspect that we will be working hard to make sure that we have our 5 trial judges ready to go for the panels that we get to have on any given week. And maybe a 6th trial judge if we're going to be doing a virtual jury trial on that week. But other than that, I can't necessarily tell you that your long assignment is going to be, you know, right after CPS. I can't tell you that. I will tell you that we are really all working very hard to make sure everybody who's ready and everybody whose motion for continuance has been denied and are then therefore ready are getting their trial judge and moving their case forward. We're trying really hard to make sure that happens. So sorry for that long non-answer, but that's what I can tell you.
Well, thank you, Judge.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Unger? Oh, but you're on mute.
That's because I don't know how to use these things very well. I was trying to find the link to the assignments, and the link in the letter, which I typed out, takes one to the health protocols. So I was wondering if anyone knows where we're able to see what the assignments, where the assignments are online. That could be posted in chat that as a link. That would be great.
What do you mean the assignments?
Well, there's a reference to assignments in Judge Rangel's letter.
Oh, he's talking about the assignments for the panels. Let me see if I can get that link for you.
Yeah.
He's talking about the pettit jury and trial court schedule.
You wouldn't be talking about our assignments and how we get, what trials we get assigned, if that's what you're looking for.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, it's not, that's not the assignment calendar for the civil district courts out of monitoring. That was just, for those of you who are aware, February 2020, right? Good old days time, February 2020. Each district judge would take a month to do our jury supervision. Go down to central jury, make sure everybody knew the qualifications, make sure everybody knew the exemptions, welcome everyone, thank them for their service, and then step to the side and hear if there were any excuses or exemptions or requests for, of their service. That process probably took about 30 minutes, maybe 45. Now we're doing that virtually and it takes significantly longer. So the schedule by which our district judges are supervising jurors has changed to a weekly schedule. And so that's the schedule that's being referenced in Judge Rangel's letter. So I'll try to find that link and post it in the chat, but that's the schedule that's being referenced, not our monitoring court civil district trial assignment schedule. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, and I guess follow up. Where can we go to see the dockets now for presiding? If anyone knows.
For presiding?
Yeah. They
I don't know.
They used to be.
They used to, y'all remember that we switched over to Odyssey.
Yeah.
Odyssey's causing a mess load of problems. Short of going into too much about it, we're still having problems accessing documents, hearings. The monitoring court is having a lot of problems with it as well. So I would venture, if you have any questions about that, I'd call the district clerk and find out what they're doing. And because that was really a service the district clerk was providing to the local bar by putting the dockets up, which is, it's not just a local bar, obviously, but to the public so they would see things. But right now, I know that they're having difficulties as well. So I don't know what they're doing to, how they're best managing that, but that would be where I direct you.
Ms. James?
Yes, good afternoon, Judge, and thank you guys for listening to our questions. Do we know if we are not one of the lucky 4 to be assigned out next week, will we be notified that we are not one of the lucky 4, or should we just assume if we aren't told that we won't be going by like a certain date? Does that make sense?
So do you have a case for next week?
No, I'm sorry, for the June 7 week.
Oh, like we missed a case. We have judges ready to try the cases.
For the June 7 week and being told next week.
So, right. I think that part of our our February 2020 practice is still there, right? Like if you haven't gotten your trial assignment, then you know that you're on standby. You come to the docket call on Monday and kind of see where you're at. As soon as we have a trial judge for your case, we will marry you up. And again, the hope and the expectation, fingers crossed, is that we will start marrying up jury trial cases and jury trial presiding judges on Tuesday of the week preceding where you are on the docket. So that way some of these, the coordination can get started earlier in the week than, you know, Thursday or Friday. I'll be candid and disclose to you that didn't happen this week. Our trial judges didn't get their assignments until late Wednesday. And so that Tuesday assignment is really kind of a goal, a really lofty goal on our part, my part, especially given the difficulties that we're having with this Odyssey system. I don't, and it's okay to not know the extent of the challenges that our staff has overcome, but we are all really working to try to get y'all married up, the case and the trial judge married up as quickly as we can.
Thank you, Judge.
Bob Thompson, can you help me with any guidance about post August 1st docket calls for presiding? What is our goal? What are we trying to achieve post August 1st? Thank you.
Can I chime
Thank
in?
you. Yes, please. Thank you.
It's incredibly early. We'd love if we had an idea of what we could expect after August 1st. I guarantee we'd be working on it. Our goal obviously is at some point to return back to some semblance of normal, whether it's a new normal or what that's going to be. We have absolutely no direction, and it'd be very difficult for us to prognosticate what's going to happen August 1st. I will say that my thought is they probably will, unless something drastic changes and the numbers climb, we probably will then be, things will open up more. Maybe social distancing requirements will either disappear or minimize. But we have to remember too that we would need a period within which we notices that are already sent out would need to be changed if possible. Otherwise, we'd have some sort of, we need to transition to that anyway. So if they were to say August 1, no social distancing whatsoever, all mandates are lifted, etc. The problem we'd have is we'd likely would have thousands of hearings scheduled in August that are scheduled for Zoom. And so we certainly wouldn't want to prejudice anyone or prohibit someone or inhibit their rights by not moving forward in some capacity, even that's a hybrid capacity. But just bear in mind, we're doing the best we can with what we have. We literally have been waiting on pins and needles for the entire month for the Supreme Court to issue its order, and it did so just a few days ago. So I think at some point we all expect we will be back in person on a more full basis, and that would include presiding, that would include monitoring, but to try to guess what's going to happen August 1st would be a big misstep on our parts. I think that's my thoughts.
It's like,
Thank you for your honest response on that. I appreciate it.
Anytime.
thank you. Any other questions about in-person jury trials? If I can, I feel like I'm the town crier for the in-person jury trials on the civil district courts, but I'm very excited about this. And I know all of you are as well. Are there any other questions?
One minor question, Judge, just a clarification. So
Yes.
by the Tuesday before their trial date, we should have an idea if we'll be assigned so we can line up the witnesses as well as our clients. Sometimes they're working, sometimes they're harder to reach than other times. So that Tuesday's an important date or whatever.
Well,
day.
that's the goal, Mr. Fagan. That is the goal, and we understand that. I think you know that everybody on the bench is a litigator, has been a litigator, was a litigator, still has, litigator blood, right? We can appreciate that, but again, like this week, that was the goal, and it didn't get done until late Wednesday. We are doing our very best, and I will. At this point, we've got just a couple more minutes. I want to make sure that everybody appreciates the monitoring court, all of our staff, but Ms. Dossman is working until midnight, at least a few days a week. And that's not where we want to be, but we're trying to work through this new system and get our dockets back the way they are. And Jen and Caroline in the office have been right there with her, trying to make sure that we're getting our dockets. So we are trying to aim for Tuesday. That being said, if we don't get you assigned on Tuesday and you're on standby and you don't get your assignment until Friday at 3:30 because the case that was going to go on Monday doesn't settle until Friday at 3:15, you're still in the same spot, right? We're still, the trial judge and you are going to try to get married up and try to get things done. And we're still going to have to potentially make some adjustments in the one voir dire per day. That is a big shift. And I keep repeating that because that is a big shift from February 2020. Our voir dires are one per day. Your jury trials will be staggered throughout the entire week. So if you are set on June 7th, but your case does not pull the voir dire until June 11th, in reality, your trial week just got pushed to June 14th. And so just please appreciate that. I know the calendars are so tight and we are all so busy, but that's where we land with one voir dire per day. And we're staggering our jury trial assignments throughout the entire week. So you may be set on June 7th, but your case may not begin voir dire until June 11th. That doesn't mean you can't do some pretrial. If you've got some cases that need to get done and you've got some logistics and coordination that you need to do with your trial judge before then, but if you're voir diring on the 11th, that's day one of your jury trial. And so you're going to be carrying over to the next week. So be mindful of that. And I wish we could give you better predictions. And, you know, we only had one jury trial a week to try in Bexar County, which is not the case. But just know that that's going to be probably, aside from the social distancing, aside from the masks, aside from the vaccinated, unvaccinated, social distancing, unsocial distancing, plexiglass, everything else, aside from everything else, that staggering is going to be very different from February 2020. Any parting thoughts or nuggets of wisdom to share from my colleagues, Judge Canales?
No, thank you all for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Judge Haas?
No, thank you for organizing this and thank you all for coming.
Judge Diaz?
Same. Thank you, Judge, and thank you to all of our participants for coming. And please give us your input if anything else comes up as we're rolling out these proceedings. We really appreciate it and take it to heart. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. And we do. And monitoring is back on YouTube. I know there were a few months that it wasn't on YouTube. So if you're interested, you've got a case coming up, maybe have staff or associate or yourself just check into the monitoring court docket. I try to make the announcements at the beginning of the docket as we move forward. So thank you all for coming. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for working with us. Y'all have a great day.
Bye.